point you want to go and grab another drink or cake, that is more than encouraged, so feel free to do that. We're going to jump into God's words now. And a few years ago, I came across an interview with a mountain guide, and he was asked what surprised him most about people attempting long-distance hikes. I listened to really fascinating things. During this talk, there is another illustration about fascinating podcasts that I listen to. But he was asked this question, and his answer wasn't what I expected. He didn't talk about fitness or expensive equipment or experience. He said the biggest mistake people make is carrying too much. People fill their rucksacks with things they think they'll need just in case. Extra clothes, another Garmin, a sat-nav thing, I don't know, food, things that seem essential at the start but become a burden by the end of the first day. The first thing an experienced guide does, so I'm told, is help them unpack. And one by one, everything comes out onto the ground, and then they kind of point at different things and take things away. So this, why you think you need 4 pairs of trousers is beyond me. Goes down, and they work out what they can leave behind. And only then can they really begin the journey. And I wonder if that's a way of hearing Jesus' words today. Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Jesus doesn't begin by asking people to try harder or to kind of make it work better for them. He begins with an invitation. Come and be. And then everything else in this passage is tied into those words. Matthew places this invitation at an interesting moment. Jesus has just spoken about the different responses to himself and to John the Baptist. John lived an austere life in the wilderness, and Jesus spent his time at dinner tables. John was criticized, Jesus was criticized. It seems as though there's always another reason not to listen. Yet Jesus doesn't become defensive. He doesn't argue. He doesn't force himself on anyone. Instead, he turns towards those who are listening and says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Sorry. Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Notice he doesn't offer not first an explanation, not first a command. He offers himself. And that's where we will begin when we walk with Jesus, not with an idea or a moral code, but with a person. And then let's jump to Romans, and it says in Romans 7:15-25. I do not understand what I do. For what I want to do, I do not do. But what I hate, I do. And if I do what I do not want to do, I agree that the law is good. As it is no longer I myself who do it, but it is sin living in me. For I know that good itself does not dwell in me. That is, in my sinful nature. For I have the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out. For I do not do the good I want to do. But the evil I do not want to do, this I keep on doing. Now if I do what I do not want to do, it is no longer I who do it, but it is sin living in me that does it. So I find this law at work. Although I want to do good, evil is right there with me. For in my inner being I delight in God's law. But I see another law at work in me, waging war against the law of my mind and making me a prisoner of the law of sin at work within me. What a wretched man I am. Who will rescue me from this body that is subject to death? Thanks be to God, who delivers me through Jesus Christ our Lord. So then I myself in my mind am a slave to God's law, but in my sinful nature a slave to the law of sin. And so Paul, I don't know whether you've met Paul, maybe you've read some of Paul's work. He's written quite a lot of the Old Testament, the New Testament, and he's not a man who kind of minces his words. Paul is the kind of guy you walk into a social setting with, and you introduce him to a friend, and then you slowly just move away as Paul then rabbits on about some deep theological or philosophical view he has, or political view, and then you kind of circle back around in about 5 minutes' time just to check, and you realise that he's still going on point one, and the friend who just invited him to get to know hasn't said a word yet. That's Paul. That's who we're meeting when we meet Paul. And so Paul doesn't doesn't mince his words in any way. And so he does also write in sentences that are vastly too complicated to just read out and expect someone to understand. So if I just read that and you're thinking, that's wonderful, but I am very warm and switched off, that's fine. But he says, what I want you to take is that he says, I do not understand what I do. And there's something wonderfully honest about that. Paul isn't pretending that following Jesus means life suddenly becomes straightforward. He describes an inner tension, a longing for goodness, a recognition that something isn't quite right. And the passage ends with Paul crying out, who will rescue me from this body of death? And it's an important question, because he doesn't ask, what technique will save me from this dying, this body of death? Or what discipline, what practice, or how can I rescue myself? He asks, who? Because the deepest needs of our hearts aren't ultimately solved by greater effort. No matter what the diary of a CEO might tell you. He asks, who? Because that's what it is. It's about relationship. We find the deepest needs of our human heart answered in relationship. I've started listening to a new podcast, so get some new illustrations from a different place than the Just the Rest is History. And this one has in it a section about mad dads, and this one was actually a mad granddad. And this grandson is really excited. He's got this plan. He's going to walk from where they live near Oxford to Wales. And so the granddad is like, oh, wow, that's so exciting. I've got some maps you can use. So he goes and ferrets away and gets his maps and brings them to his grandson. And then in the excitement, the grandson just takes them and starts walking. And then he starts walking across the country. And then he realizes that in front of him is these things that shouldn't be there, such as towns. And then there's this other thing in the way, such as the M4. And it takes him a few days to realise that something isn't quite right. And so he calls his mum and he's like, I just can't work it out. There's all these things that shouldn't be here that are here. And then the mum, knowing her dad, goes and asks about these maps that he was so excited to hand over. And it turns out that the maps were from the 1940s. And so there were some fairly big parts of the UK that didn't exist at that time. And he's like, well, I don't know how to do this. And so then eventually he realised that it was 2014 and he could take out a phone and he had maps there. And so then he went and used his own map and he found the right way. But what he had to do is he had to get rid of the old map to be able to find the right way, to find the way that he was supposed to go. And often we imagine that walking with Jesus is about us trying harder, trying to become more patient, trying to be more loving, trying to be more peaceful, kind of shaking ourselves up to read our Bible more, to be more faithful. And those things are good and those things matter. But Jesus did not come to simply increase our effort. He came to give us a new way of living, a new heart, a new beginning. So Jesus goes on and says something surprising. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. And as we read through the Gospels and kind of see Jesus' illustrations, they often come from farming because that's what everybody around them would have understood. They would have understood a farming reference. I pose, unless it's our play farm, we probably don't understand most farming references anymore. So a yoke. There's lots of different ways to represent a yoke. So Hamid, would you come stand here, please? Thank you. Sam, just because you're the safest. No, you're actually probably fairly equally yoked.
Yeah, we're maybe there's an argument for that.
Yeah, no, okay. Keegan. Thank you. This is supposed to be far quicker than this, sorry, I should have prepped. So farming, back in the day, they'd have had a yoke, be this big wooden thing put between two people, or two cows, sorry, and they'd have walked and ploughed the field behind them and would have kept them going in the same direction. But if they were unequally yoked, such as Keely and Hamid are, it would veer off, so if you could just walk next to each other, and then veer towards Hamid, because Hamid is longer leg. And now you go the other way, because Hamid has got small. There you go, see? What an amazing illustration. Now you all understand the yoke. You may sit back down. Thank you, everybody. And so there'd be two animals yoked together, and they could walk together. And at first, it sounds like by taking a yoke, this big wooden thing, and putting it between, it feels like another burden. But listen to how Jesus describes it. For I am gentle and humble in heart. And that's the only place in the gospel where Jesus explicitly tells us what his heart is like. Gentle, humble, not demanding, not hurried, not impatient, gentle. Then he says, learn from me. Learn from me, walk with me, live with me, discover my pace. And so as we put on that yoke, as we walk with Jesus, rather than beautifully represented by Hamid and Keely veering slightly from one side to the other, rather than it feeling like this burden, we get pulled in loads of different directions as we kind of let anything kind of be the thing that we yoke ourselves to. That we come with Jesus and he lifts some of the weight. I don't know whether you've ever had that moment where you're carrying something heavy and then someone just comes and lifts it and just takes some of the weight for a little bit of the journey. Maybe you're trying to carry this heavy suitcase into an airport and someone just takes part of it and they carry it for you. It's that feeling of the weight being lifted. The suitcase is still being carried. There's still the weight of the suitcase, but it's easier to carry because Jesus is carrying it with us. And the invitation of Jesus isn't simply to believe his teachings, but to organize our lives around his presence, to be with him, to become like him, to learn how to live as he lived. And perhaps that's what rest is really like. Not escaping life, but learning to walk through life with Jesus. And Jesus promises you will find rest for your souls. Not just rest for your body, not a day off, not a holiday, rest for your soul. The deepest part of who you are. The place where fears settle, where questions linger, where hope is born. And there's a quote that says, you have made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you. And perhaps that's what this invitation still speaks so powerfully to us today. Because Jesus is addressing something timeless, the longing to come home. And I finish with this. As you can tell from my amazing tan, we have been away in Cornwall for the last few days, and the last season for us has been exhausting. We have 2 small children, and then other things around it have made it also exhausting. And so the feeling of being rested has been kind of a figment of my imagination. And then I found myself in Cornwall, of all places, and then kind of walking along the beach with a dog who, when she was on the beach, is possibly the best behaved dog you've ever seen, and other places less. And I just found myself kind of just having this internal kind of like wrestle of like, oh, I should feel really rested right now. This should solve all of the tiredness. It should solve all of the kind of like restlessness in me. And it didn't really feel like he was doing that. And as I listened to all of the nonsense podcasts that I could find, there was a beach where the signal didn't work. So I couldn't busy my mind with something else. I just had to be still. Had to just be quiet with Jesus. And I found myself praying in a way that I haven't prayed for a long time. I've kind of, as I was doing, I'd start bringing those questions, the things, the wrestles that I have to Jesus, and being like, this is it. This is what I have. I'm pretty annoyed about this. I don't really understand this. This is amazing. Thank you, Lord. And then as I stood at the side of the beach, very far from other people, and quietly kind of just spoke to God, or quietly sang very quietly to Jesus, just felt something lifting from me as I brought it to him, and allowed myself to carry and be yoked with Jesus rather than to kind of dig my head down and plow on through. So the invitation's come. Walk with me. I actually finished with this. The last bit was mine. In the message, this passage it's just wonderful. And it says, are you tired, worn out, burnt out on religion? Come to me, get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me, and work with me, and watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. That's the invitation, to learn the unforced rhythms of grace. As we come to Jesus, we're coming weary and burdened, and he gives us rest. That doesn't mean he quickly fixes the problem every time. Sometimes it does. But it does mean that the weight is lighter. It does mean that we're not carrying it on our own. Amen. We've got a little bit of time, and so we're just going to wait in this time and let Jesus come and meet us.